Welcome everybody. We're thrilled that you joined us today for this Voices for Action webinar. My name is Brianna Salmon. I'm the Executive Director here at Green Communities Canada, and I'm going to be your facilitator for the day. We're thrilled by the number of people that signed up. And before we get going, I'm going to do just a quick bit of housekeeping. So Leif, our communications manager, has our agenda slide up. Part of this session will be recorded for future sharing. So I noticed in the chat, some folks were asking whether this will be shared. It will indeed be shared. So you're welcome to view it or to pass it along to others who weren't able to be here today. We invite you to use the chat to introduce yourselves, where you're joining from, and the city and organization where you're working. This presentation will be in English, and closed captioning is available if you'd like to access that. Participants are going to be muted and your videos are going to be turned off. If you have questions for our speakers today, you're invited to submit them using the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. And time permitting, we'll try and answer all of these questions at the very end of the webinar. We've got, as you can see, a lot to cover in just 60 minutes. So additional resources, reports, websites that are mentioned by our speakers are going to be shared in the chat. And we'll also follow up with an email to be sent after the webinar. So you'll get all the things that we share in the chat. You don't need to worry about saving them. After this webinar, you'll have the option to complete a short survey. And this is our first Voices for Action webinar. So we really appreciate your thoughtful feedback as it'll help to inform future sessions. So again, welcome everybody today. To start us off in a good way, I'd like to introduce Patricia Sturby and Peter Kroll, who are the co-founders of the National Healing Forest Initiative, to share an opening with us. I'll pass it to you, Patricia, and to Peter.
Fabulous. Greetings, everyone. Peter and I are deeply grateful to Green Communities Canada for inviting us to share our land acknowledgement with you all today. Wherever you are joining from, and Peter and I will both speak. So as a First Nation woman with roots in the prairies of Saskatchewan, I want to honor and acknowledge that the land on which I get to live, work, and play is the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin people. I feel grateful for having Ottawa as my home. I chose it for me, and for the opportunity to walk along the shores of the Kichissibee, where Algonquin ancestors once paddled their canoes. And I also had the chance last year to watch celebrants and descendants of Algonquin Grand Chief Constant Penezi paddle return their paddle to Ottawa, their canoe to Ottawa, where they had honored their ancestors by retracing Chief Penezi's route from his summering place to his hunting grounds. And today we also take this moment to acknowledge and honor all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, and we reaffirm our respect for the inherent and treaty rights of all Indigenous peoples across this land we now call Canada. Peter.
Thank you, Patricia, and thank you, Jen, and everybody for this invitation to be part of this opening. I am Peter Kroll. I'm in Ottawa. I am not Indigenous, rather I am settler colonial ancestry. My heritage extends to England and Scotland. Like many other settler people, I've benefited greatly from living on Turtle Island and the traditional lands of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. As a visitor on this land, I have an important responsibility to acknowledge, honor, and respect the grounds on which we are privileged to gather in pursuit of healing nature. I believe that it's not only important to recognize the Algonquin for their care for and teachings about the earth and our relations, but to honor those teachings through the interactions today and every day hereafter. In light of our collective history and understanding of our roles as treaty people, may we all dedicate ourselves to moving forward in a good way, in the spirit of partnership, collaboration, and reconciliation, as we learn together and act on the possibilities before us today. Miigwech, thank you.
Thank you so much, Patricia and Peter, for the opening. We really appreciate your presence, and we're grateful for your words. So before we dive into our presentations about the mini forest movement, I want to say a few words about Green Communities Canada. So I'm going to ask Leif to bring up the first slide. And I want to start by saying, we know that sustainable and climate-ready communities are needed, and we know that this need is urgent. I'm sure this is a sentiment that's shared by everybody on this call. For nearly 30 years, Green Communities Canada has connected and supported community organizations from across the country to accelerate climate action. We're deeply focused not just on the why we need to take climate action, but more specifically on the how. How do we make the momentous shifts that are needed in such a short period of time? How do we address the very real barriers that communities, and especially marginalized communities, face to taking action? How do we ensure that our work is intersectional and inclusive? And how do we make these shifts last? Our programs are diverse and always transforming, but our goal remains the same: invest in building the local capacity needed to accelerate ambitious climate solutions. This is a solution locally, and this needs to be the solution nationally. The next slide, Leif. So today at GCC, we support more than 50 organizations, and together we drive equitable and transformative change from coast to coast to coast. We do this by providing a network for organizations to share resources and knowledge, offer programming and services that organizations can roll out on the ground, and really importantly, by funding these organizations to lead this vital work. Green Communities Canada has been leading green infrastructure programs for more than a decade. Green infrastructure is one of the many ways of leveraging nature-based solutions to address the dual challenges of both the climate crisis and the loss of natural habitats. When compared to climate solutions that often get more attention in the news, nature-based solutions are by far more cost-effective and deliver broad and equitable benefits. In 2023, with funding from NRCan, Green Communities Canada and our partners established an exceptional program that supports communities to deliver an emerging urban forest planting model, the mini forest, which is why we're all here today. Next slide, Leif. Before I pass it to GCC's brilliant green infrastructure coordinator, Tianna, who's going to delve into our work on mini forests, I want to recognize some of the partners that are here today and all those who've contributed in significant ways to our progress thus far. My sincere gratitude to those whose names I see on our attendance list: Sarah and Brendan from Definity, Karen from RBC, Michael from the Greenbelt Foundation, Graham from All One Fund, John from Beacon, and a number of folks on the call from FCM. So without further ado, I want to pass it to Tianna, Green Communities Canada's Green Infrastructure Program Coordinator, who's going to share a little bit more about our work on the Mini Forest Project. Tianna, off to you.
Thank you, Brianna. Hello, everyone. My name is Tianna, and I am the Green Infrastructure Program Coordinator here at Green Communities Canada. I am pleased to be here today to provide a brief introduction to mini forests and share some of the great work that Green Communities Canada has been leading. So, what is a mini forest? A mini forest, also known as a microforest or tiny forest, is a community of native trees and shrubs planted tightly together in an urban or suburban site based on the Miyawaki method of afforestation. The method emphasizes the use of diverse, dense plantings with locally native species collections, soil preparation, and multi-layered design to mimic the complexity of a native forest. This dense planting technique results in taller plants in a shorter time period. Next slide, please, Leif. Thank you. Many forests provide a variety of ecosystem services that offer both environmental and social benefits. Increasing biodiversity and providing necessary habitat for wildlife, these small plots can have a big impact on local environments. They provide much-needed green spaces for people to enjoy, offering physical and mental health benefits and improving air quality. Many forests sequester carbon and help reduce runoff. They can prevent flooding and mitigate the urban heat island effect. An additional benefit of mini forests is that they are fast-growing and relatively low maintenance once they are established. Next slide, please. Thank you. As Brianna mentioned, in 2023, Green Communities Canada and the Network of Nature launched the National Mini Forest Pilot to address the growing need to connect Canadians to nature and increase green spaces in urban environments. This program, led by Green Communities Canada in collaboration with Dugan Ecology, Canadian Geographic, and Wilder Climate Solutions through the Network of Nature, aims to contribute to Canada's goal to plant 2 billion trees by 2030 to address climate change and biodiversity loss. Since the program's inception, we have supported the planting of 32 mini forests across 23 communities within 5 different provinces. As you can see, we have worked with a diverse group of partner organizations to make this possible, and we are excited to continue scaling these projects in 2025. To dive a little bit more into the impact of these mini forest plantings, these projects transformed nearly 7,000 meters squared into flourishing urban green spaces, which is equivalent to the size of 16 basketball courts. 3,500 volunteers were engaged throughout these events in the last 2 years, and 53% of these individuals were youth. Over 12,500 new trees were planted, along with shrubs, wildflowers, and grasses, accumulating to over 20,600 total plants. As program participants, partner organizations accessed resources produced by Green Communities Canada and the Network of Nature, including professionally produced mini forest coordinator training videos and curriculum, planting guidance, project management tools, and monitoring and maintenance programs. There is a need within the mini forest movement in Canada for monitoring and long-term data about their benefits and performance compared to natural forests and to conventional tree planting methods. Throughout the Network of Nature Collaborative, Vineland Research and Innovation Centre collected soil samples from 2 mini forests in Hamilton, Ontario, and compared them to samples collected from a conventional planting. Both mini forests contain more carbon in the topsoil and subsoils than the conventional tree planting site. We continue to learn from our past planting projects and have welcomed opportunities to expand our research partnerships. In 2025, we will be working with Vineland Research and Innovation to continue studying the soil health of mini forests, and we will be funding more projects this year. In the interest of growing the mini forest movement in Canada, there is a need to continue monitoring and maintaining the existing mini forests, conducting research into their performance, and observing how the Miyawaki mini forest method is working in the Canadian context. We are excited for the support of the growth of the mini forest movement and look forward to building new partnerships and learning throughout this experience. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tianna, for this presentation, and sincerely for all the work that you do to make the Mini Forest Project thrive across Canada. I now want to take the opportunity to introduce Tahia Devisscher, Assistant Professor at UBC Urban Forest Program, who will be our first presenter.
Thank you very much, and greetings from the traditional land of the Musqueam people, also called the University of British Columbia. I am very thankful for the invitation to be part of Voices for Action and the opportunity to share a bit the preliminary results of a study we started last year in collaboration with Green Communities Canada, looking at mini forests that have been established across the nation to distill lessons and good practices, best practices that can support the mini forest movement. I have divided my presentation in 3 parts. I will first introduce the scope of this study, then share some of the benefits and the lessons learned that we harvested from the mini forests. And then I will conclude by highlighting some of the success factors and ideas for the future. These are the 15 mini forests we included in this study. All of them were established in 2023 across different locations of Canada. You can see some are in the west, some are in the east, with a notorious clustering of mini forests in the province of Ontario. We implemented 3 methods for this study: a policy review looking at national and municipal strategies, a survey that targeted these 15 mini forests and combined it with a review of the narrative and impact reports they had prepared after plantation, and semi-structured interviews to go really a bit more in depth and learn from 6 case studies of very successful mini forests that would help us identify some important themes to support the growth of the movement moving forward. The mini forests we involve in the study share similar characteristics. They are all urban or semi or suburban. They have easy access either through roads or trail networks. Most of them are located in parks and forested areas close to single-family housing and schools. Now, to jump directly on the benefits that we have observed in this study, and particularly within the ecological realm, participants have mentioned in all of the mini forests we studied an accelerated growth rate of the vegetation, combined with also a very low mortality rate of the planted trees, all of which really contributes to the overall health that we have been observing in the mini forests and the resilience of this novel ecosystem. Now, because mini forests incorporate multiple species, we have also observed an increase in biodiversity, which really relates to creation of habitat. Participants mentioned more insects and wildlife visiting the mini forests. Now, these mini forests were established only 2 years ago, so it's a bit early to really conduct an ecological assessment, but as you heard from Tianna, there are already some studies on the ground looking at the soil health impacts of the mini forest, looking at tree growth and the presence of urban wildlife. And we really think that these studies are really important because they are generating very valuable evidence that will be informing the ecological benefits of mini forest over time. Now, in the past 2 years, however, we had a lot of evidence generated around the social benefits of mini forests, starting with the ability of mini forests to play a really important role in community building, particularly during planting day. We heard from participants that they observed intergenerational exchange during planting days with very active participation from the youth, and we saw that also in Tianna's figures. Participants mentioned that mini forests have strengthened the connection of local residents to nature, particularly among community members that have maintained an engagement with the mini forest, either through environmental education, by bringing children from schools to visit the mini forest and observe change, or by engaging in training that are part of stewardship programs and caring of the mini forest over time. We've heard from participants that mini forests have become symbols of hope that have helped local residents overcome ecological grief and build sense of ownership and agency to do something about it. We also asked mini forests about the experienced challenges, and some of the common issues they raised had to do with maintenance. Here, the top 4 items show you some examples of mini forests dealing with herbivores, weeds, and difficulties in watering the mini forests. But I would say the most important challenges that we have observed so far have more to do with where the funding is going right now, which is really good in order to support the acquisition of the plants, the soil preparation, the planting day, and all of the logistics to orchestrate these activities. But this funding is supporting the staff time, the human resources to maintain the mini forests and the long-term stewardship of these mini forests, which really goes hand in hand with some of the governance challenges that we're also finding that have to do with uncertainty around the long-term protection of the mini forests, the limited capacity for maintenance, and the somewhat lack or scarcity of monitoring systems that are in place. Now, to conclude, I would like to highlight some of the success factors that we found through the study, but please bear in mind that this is really a very brief overview. We will have more detailed explanations of these success factors and their related best practices in a more complete study report that will be released later on this year in spring. One factor that was very common among successful mini forests is the availability of local expertise. That is, urban foresters or restoration experts that were there helping the mini forest in the selection of species, the configuration of the plants during plantation, and also providing supervision post-plantation for the maintenance of the mini forest. Another success factor is the strong relationships, particularly here the strategic alliances with local government, because it's through municipalities being very involved in the mini forest that we have observed more security around maintenance of the mini forest, for example, by including them in the watering programs. We've also seen how municipalities can play a really important role in the long-term protection of the land where mini forests are being created, as well as the multiplication and replication of this approach in the municipalities. And another success factor is this stewardship, the ability to lean on the locals for their engagement, for their active participation in the stewardship, in the caring of the forest. The policy review revealed that while there is interest and resources at the national level to support tree planting, it is really at the municipal level where the entry points to policies that can support the mini forest movement exists. And that's because mini forests are multifunctional systems. They can be relevant to multiple policies at the same time. For example, they can speak to an urban forest strategy and canopy target that a municipality may have, while at the same time speaking to the climate action plan and the biodiversity protection strategy that a municipality may already have in place. And to conclude, I would like to highlight that it is really the existing mini forests that are the source of inspiration and the fuel for the movement. It is from experiences that people are learning through the creation of the mini forest and the perceived benefits of it, that there is interest in replicating this experience in other municipalities, in more locations. And this has been enabled also by a very open approach we observed in terms of resources sharing, the creation of guidelines and templates that people are sharing very openly, and online, free, easy to access training. All of these will really enable a shift from more traditional, conventional tree planting approaches to these new windows of opportunities that are opening to experiment with alternative ways to create green spaces in cities, spaces that are more wild, more diverse, and more inclusive of locals to be directly, actively involved in the creation of the green space, and also on the effects of having an outcome, having a completely direct impact on it. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you to the research team behind this study. Please take this as an invitation to stay tuned for our findings coming out this spring.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tahia, for your research. It's really exciting, and I'm really grateful for our partnership on this project. Having worked in the nonprofit sector for quite a long time, I think it's really critical that we understand and measure the impact of the mini forest model, and your research is really essential in us doing this. So thank you again. Next, I'd like to introduce Kristen Bill, Project Manager of Forest Health at the City of Hamilton. Kristen is making big mini things happen in Hamilton, and we're thrilled to have her here today. So I'll pass it to Kristen.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know that there's a lot of synergies between our presentations, Tahia, so I'm a little bit excited to see how the Q&A goes. But yeah, thank you everyone for coming to my presentation on our 2024 Pritchard Trail Mini Forest, which was a collaboration between Green Communities Canada and the Greenbelt Foundation. First, I really want to situate everyone who's unfamiliar with Hamilton, Ontario. The city of Hamilton is situated upon the territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant. And if you look on this map that I have here, we have a yellow star where Toronto is and a red star where Hamilton is. And we have many natural features that kind of run through Hamilton, which I want to discuss just at the beginning today. So to protect and grow these features that you see on this map, the City of Hamilton has put forward an urban forest strategy, and this has recommended actions. Planting is a major feature of that, and that includes mini forests. It's a key to the strategy and to increasing our canopy cover, which is currently set at a target of 40% by 2050. This project has become a key part of that, right? So Hamilton has really unique features, including it's situated in the Carolinian forest range. So we have a lot of really interesting tree species that I have here. A large majority of that forest system within the urban boundary is situated on the Niagara Escarpment. So this is a snap from the Greenbelt Foundation's website, and you can see that the Niagara Escarpment kind of runs through Hamilton and divides it kind of in half. The black circle is where we chose the site. And that kind of looks a lot like this in this aerial image. the site is kind of surrounded by this white bubble, and this is a very I had to work with a lot of unique features of this site, but it is situated near the Red Hill Valley Parkway and the Lincoln Alexander Parkway. So why did we choose Pritchard Trail? We learned a lot when we were engaging partners in 2023 for our Johnston 2 Arboretum mini forest, which was also a Green Communities Canada and Greenbelt Foundation supported project. And so we came to this area already with partners established. So we knew that we had a partnership with Nawasa Kandasa Tag, which is an Indigenous youth organization, and Hamilton Police Services. And they wanted to do a planting together to spike relationships and to try and have a partnership, which is really exciting. And we did that with the Indigenous relations team through the city. But the site in particular also has a lot of really amazing natural features. It extends the Red Hill Valley in Kings Forest Park. It has an accessible trail for pedestrians, which is paved, fabulous for wheelchair users. The area is also adjacent to a river network and across from the highway. And it's also land set aside through the Red Hill Valley Open Space Replacement Land Strategy. So the engaged partners is really a key piece, and I really wanted to highlight that and why we chose the site. But there was also looking at site preparation. There was also goals that we had to set forward to make this site work. So there was an existing planting that you can kind of see here. We wanted to work with those existing natural features. There's a woodlot. We wanted to increase canopy. We wanted to provide habitat for wildlife. Noise protection for trail users is one of the key things that I think about a lot, especially considering we have a major parkway that runs, just across the hill from it. So how did we really prepare this site? We needed to take down some of the grass that was growing so that we could get to the soil surface. So we do mow the site, we do compost in a thicker layer of mulch. And in the top image, you can see we really work into that woodlot so we can work on extending it and around the natural features. That equated to over 1,000 square meters of land. We did want to do more, and we're looking to extend it in the future. A key thing that I wanted to highlight for planting success is really species selection. So I like to use the resources from Forestry and Conservation Association to select species that are within our seed zone. And I look for species that have, the correct soil tolerance, drainage, and shade tolerance. I'm also looking for a combination of canopy, subcanopy, shrub layers so that I can create an ecosystem that's mimicking what is naturally there as much as possible. Another key feature is really using and checking in on your plant material. So we use a competitive procurement practice at the city, which many municipalities use, but I also inspect everything that comes in, and we want to keep it as healthy as possible up until the planting. We also work with nurseries to discuss any quality issues that we see that we want to address. And sometimes that involves, an exchange of different species. So having said that, we did plant over 2,700 trees, and that includes like maples, American beech, and everything else that you see here. If anybody's interested, I'm happy to provide a more detailed list and the counts of each species. And I work to looking at the percentages to try and make sure that canopy, subcanopy, everything's kind of working in line and is a really good assemblage. Another thing that was new to us is we added a bioinoculant. So this was to try and increase success. We did it as like really an experiment. We've never done it before, but it does help the trees establish. It increases the root biomass by 20%. It decreases the amount of pathogens that are going to be attacking those young trees. So we really wanted to give those trees a jump start at life. And then now to discuss our planting events. So it was split among 4 events because we had a very large number of trees and a very large number of volunteers that wanted to participate. So across 8 organizations, we had 130 youth volunteers and over 230 volunteers in total. But to kick that off, we did a Truth and Reconciliation tree planting event that took place in September. And it was with Nawasa Kundasanteg, which is a nonprofit youth organization for Indigenous youth. And it really provides high quality programs and services, sorry, to the youth in Hamilton. They wanted to partner with Hamilton Police Services. It's also with the city's library. So it was an amazing event, but we wanted to make sure we reduced barriers. So we had a bus to pick up families. We also had an Indigenous knowledge keeper that did an opening ceremony, a smudging ceremony to really kickstart this Pritchard Trail on a positive note. We also had internal staff of over 65 volunteers. It's amazing because we really want to kind of start from within and make sure that our staff know what forestry does and what mini forests are and why it's important to protect the natural environment. Another one we did was with Lawfield and Strathcona Elementary Schools. This was 115 young kids that kind of span different ages and different class sizes. One of the things that they wanted to do is kind of talk about the trees and souls and how it makes you feel when you plant. So, I always try to provide a little bit of a unique experience when I'm working with these organizations, and this was a really fulfilling one. And then for the results. So as you can see, we worked within the natural features. Our trees are all within where we kind of wanted them to go up into the woodlot. And I hope one day that trail users can walk past here and not even notice that there's a highway adjacent to this woodlot. And I hope to provide, more tree canopy cover and also a home for wildlife. But what makes this planting successful, or why do I hope it will be successful? The tree selection, as I mentioned, quality material, really working with your nurseries. Bioinoculation, I think, will be an exciting thing to just watch out for and just see how it works with our trees and with our site characteristics. But volunteer engagement is key, making sure we're working with good people who are really excited to be there. Future things we're looking to do. So one of them is soil moisture meters. I want to know on site if the trees need water, so that then we can send out a crew to be watering the trees, monitoring the progress, especially with the bioinoculant, seeing how that works, if we should be implementing it, and then extending the planting. As I said, as we were hoping to get in more trees, that will be a future piece of work. And I just want to thank all of our partners, the Greenbelt Foundation, Green Communities Canada, for their support through the Living Cities Canada Fund, and I look forward to answering all your questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kristen. It's really, truly inspiring work. I lived in Hamilton for many years, and I continue to be really impressed by your community-engaged climate initiatives. So thank you again.
Oh, thank you.
Our final speaker is Sharon MacGougan, president of the Garden City Conservation Society. Garden City's cultivated an impressive grassroots movement, and I'm excited to hear more. So I will pass it over to Sharon.
Thank you. So we're a conservation society. Our challenge is mitigating ecological loss in our community. Worldwide problem, but in need of local solutions. North America has lost 3 billion birds since the 1970s, and the #1 reason is habitat loss. Protecting habitat is hard, we know from experience. Restoring it is better, and best is to do it by moving hearts and minds. In 2022, we read about the Miyawaki method. It moved our hearts and minds. To date, our society has collaborated on 5 Miyawaki mini forests in Richmond, BC, the first on school grounds, then 4 in city parks. Our forests range in size from 100 to 200 square meters, and our society is 100% volunteer. Slide 2. We began with a 1 square meter demonstration, Miyawaki, on Earth Day 2022, and a second one at the fall equinox. Partly for promotional reasons, but mainly we wanted to practice. Both were celebratory public events. Former MLA Henry Yao in the foreground, admiring the Earth Day demonstration plot 7 months after it was planted. He later became an important supporter and promoter of the Miyawaki mini forests. We planted the first actual forest in November 2022. Our society was fully hands-on in all aspects, hard work, but we learned a lot. Mainly that it's important to get that first forest in the ground. Having an example really makes a difference. Next. The first Miyawaki in a city park planted April 2023, 6 months after the one on school grounds. We gained valuable experience and formed an alliance with a national mini forest group, which is an amazing, great support. The 2 billion trees funded program funded the project. Project is aligned with the City of Richmond's environmental sustainability goals, particularly leadership in environmental sustainability through sustainable and proactive solutions that mitigate climate change and other environmental impacts. The planting event was a family affair, lots of children. They're the future generation we're planting for. Hopefully, they'll see the same birds in their backyards that we see today. Next slide. The completed Miyawaki in Terra Nova Rural Park. Birds Canada is now completing a baseline bird diversity study for our society to compare the bird activity in this forest with a nearby traditional tree planted area. Maintenance involves periodically removing Himalayan blackberry. Next. There are now 2 Miyawaki forests at Terra Nova Rural Park. In the foreground, the first, about 6 months after planting, and behind it, the ground is prepped for the second, planted October 2023. Lessons learned. Less mulch on the first forest means lots of weeds. It's also changing back into a wetland all on its own. Rushes have spontaneously appeared. The second forest was raised up and had more mulch, fewer weeds and blackberries. In the spring, to our surprise and delight, daffodils bloomed around the edge, planted not by us, but by a nature preschool group. Very young stewards of the earth already at work, loving the forest. Exactly what we're aiming for. Next slide. In March 2024, MLA Henry Yao initiated Miyawaki number 4 at Garden City Park. Unfortunately, he was not reelected. Otherwise, we'd surely be planning more Miyawaki projects with him. 120 volunteers came that day, mostly his constituents, many not speaking English. Yao's office provided translation services at the event. Yao told us later many constituents asked when they can plant another one. People love to plant Miyawaki forests. It left that signage produced by the City of Richmond explaining the Miyawaki method and listing the species planted. In the background, the area prepped for planting. Our society offers tours of our forest to staff from various municipalities, community groups, researchers, and students. Anyone interested in learning more is invited to come and plant with us. It's a training ground, or in this case, a training forest. At right, orange markings for placing upper canopy trees shown in the pots. Next. The completed Garden City Park forest, which is really growing well. It's surrounded by logs and branches, so no one accidentally walks in the area. Next. This slide shows the Garden City lands, 136 acres in the center of Richmond. Around 20 years ago, a few people sitting around a kitchen table vowed to save them from development. This became a people's movement, the Garden City Lands Coalition, and then, when the lands were saved, the Garden City Conservation Society. We were very excited to have the opportunity to plant Miyawaki No. 5, our first linear forest. You can see outlined in red at the top of the center plot. On our beloved, I'm going to say that sentence again. I was looking at the plot at the site. We were very excited to have the opportunity to plant Miyawaki No. 5, our first linear forest, on our beloved Garden City lands this past November, funded by Living Cities through Green Communities Canada and the International Tree Foundation in the UK. I want to make a special mention here to 2 Rotary clubs that came to our rescue when some expected volunteers canceled. Well, it was an atmospheric river. We planted this forest during a bitterly cold day and an atmospheric river. The message here is just keep moving forward. It is a joyous experience to plant a Miyawaki mini forest. Ginny's face shows it, and she's been working through an atmospheric river. We are a family that includes a natural world. With each forest, we plant a seed and watch it grow. Next. Conservation, education, and public engagement are powerful partners. And next. Thank you. But the slide really should say in gratitude for all the hearts and minds that are already turned to positive action through the planting and facilitating planting of these little forests of hope. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon. It's really inspiring to hear all that you've achieved in this short period of time, and I really appreciate you being here with us today. So many thanks to our speakers who all remained within the allocated time. It means that we have an opportunity for some Q&A, which is great. We've had lots of questions in the webinar chat. A few questions are posted. I'll just direct folks. There's a Q&A button at the bottom, so you're welcome to post questions there. And we also had some questions that were submitted in advance as people were registering. So I'm going to get us started with a couple of questions that were submitted in advance. And this first one, I think I'll sort of start with either Sharon or Kristen, if either of you want to hop in. For someone who's new to mini forests, how did you get started? What was your first step to embark on a mini forest project?
Well, our society was quite worried about ecological loss in our community, because we know that if we don't have habitat, then we won't have birds, as one example. You know, we have to do something about biodiversity loss. And one of our directors saw a Hannah Lewis article in The Guardian. And at the same time, we met an artist in a park, and that artist happened to be working with a teacher in the school. And he was busy pollinating our enthusiasm and excitement about the Miyawaki project. And within a few months, we were planning the first forest. So that's how we started.
Amazing. Kristen, do you want to hop in about how you got started in Hamilton?
Yeah, I won't speak towards my own personal experience, but I'll speak towards the city as a whole. So I believe Juliana Kashmiri is maybe also on the call. Green Venture was, a significant contributor to bringing mini forests to Hamilton. And implementing that method in Hamilton, and they needed a site. They collaborated with Dugan and Associates, which is really good because they also did the training program with Green Communities Canada, brought a lot of knowledge. And there was, I think the first Canadian test plot is on city property because of those two organizations. And we saw how well the trees grew. That's incredible. So it was a quick implementation after kind of witnessing how well certain trees are thriving in an area that's, really poor for the actual typical plantings that we put in, like a caliper planting. And I know that Tianna kind of threw it up on the slide there at one point about Vineland's kind of soil tests that have been done. And there's a whole bunch of tests that are associated with those soil tests, not just carbon, but it's kind of the Kickstarter for us in this movement. And so it was a no-brainer to kind of join Green Communities Canada and expand our pilot projects across Hamilton to new sites and try and engage more partners and bring in more volunteers and just grow as fast as we can at the scale that we need according to our urban forest strategy.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And there were also a number of, you sort of referenced some of the training that was offered. There were a number of questions about available resources to plant a mini forest. So I'll just direct everybody to GCC's free online mini forest training course. And I'll ask Saida to put that in the chat in case you'd like to check it out. It's also, I think it was in the chat a bit earlier, but we'll share that as a follow-up too. So there are some great resources that are available for free for folks that are interested in learning more and getting started in their communities. One of the questions we had was about any long-term concerns or maintenance requirements sort of 10 to 20 years down the road that we anticipate with a mini forest planting and trees planted in close proximity. So I see, Kristen, you look like you want to respond, and maybe we can pass it to Tahia too after.
I just want to say, to speak towards that, we really don't know in the Canadian context. And so part of this is an experiment, and we need to be really, cognizant of where we're putting in these experiments. But, part of the method is that it is mimicking natural forest progression in a very short time window. So a lot of questions that I typically get are like, what is the survival rate? We expect that trees are going to die and open up pockets of sunlight and nutrients for other trees to come within and to mimic that natural forest progression. So I suspect that the maintenance 10 years from now will be significant. Like, I'm not going to say that it won't be. I think that it's just depends on what you like to do and where that location is. So you'll want to leave all the wood on site and all of that good stuff. But, there might be, depending on the location, there might be some concerns in terms of trees falling and needing to protect certain walking paths from pedestrians.
Thanks for the question. It's a really good question. And I also love to see in the chat how many people are interested in starting their own mini forest where you are. That's fantastic. I echo Kristen in that we don't really know in the context of Canada. We have observed older mini forests in Japan, but we don't know what's going to happen here. And this is why it's so important to study mini forests, to monitor them over time, and not only in one location, but in multiple locations, multiple provinces, and really get a sense of what is happening with the species there, how do they grow, and what are the changes that we observe that are naturally occurring because of that high density plantation. We certainly expect competition, which right now is pushing productivity, is pushing growth. We don't know what is going to happen in 10 years or in 20 years. So it's really important to observe and treat this as an experiment, as a pilot that will inform our decisions on alternative tree planting methods that can be not only for trees, but for habitats, for the soil, for creating a more holistic approach to the green spaces. And that's why I think also, in addition to thinking only on how these trees are growing, it's important in our monitoring to look at urban wildlife, to look at the trees, like these other studies that can all be very complementary. And definitely also look at what people are doing and the experience of the mini forests.
Thank you so much. That's such a good answer. So, I mean, I think one of the things that's really exciting about the presentations today is the way that collaboration is at the forefront in terms of moving the mini forest movement forward. And we have some folks on the call who are representing governments at the municipal level in particular, and in some cases provincial. And there was a question about how municipalities can support and engage with citizen groups and neighborhood associations to plant mini forests. So Kristen, I don't know if you want to sort of start us off with an answer to that, given that you're representing the municipality.
Yeah. So we do it in a variety of ways. We have a really high number of repeat volunteers. We already do have like a network of volunteers that are established as, tree planters within our organization. But we also partner with Devisscher, and they bring so much expertise in that public communication, and it's really amazing to partner with them because sometimes as a municipality, it's really hard to do the legwork in terms of like volunteer coordination and stuff like that. So if you're able to partner with an outside organization that can help you, it alleviates a lot of that pressure, but also increases your network of people that you can reach. So I think that would be my suggestion.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for answering that question. One of the next questions we have is about community engagement in these kinds of activities. And there's a question around whether, perhaps this is compared to some other planting strategies like a rain garden or a community garden, whether the Miyawaki method of tight spacing of plants supports large numbers of volunteers. And Sharon, maybe you could sort of start us off with your experience around the number of volunteers that were involved in these projects. I know we saw in Hamilton, in some cases it was, more than 100. So obviously there's some opportunities, but maybe Sharon, you could sort of let us know your experience around volunteer engagement in the planting process.
Yes, I can. We have a good example from MLA Yao's project at Garden City Park, because he was so enthusiastic. He got so many people signed up. It was only 100 square meters, and we had 120 volunteers that we knew of in advance. I think the number was even higher than that. So the city of Richmond was really wonderful. They did a quick pivot and they said, well, we have a lot of Himalayan blackberry on each side of this forest. So they brought all of the equipment in. And so wish I had a picture of our favorite politician, because he's just, covered in mud and he's busy leading the blackberry work. So we actually were able to engage everyone that way. But the response is just overwhelming. I mean, people just want to plant and they're waiting for the next one to come. So that's how we handled that experience.
I just want to quickly add that I think shape is important. So if you have the shape and it's all one tight area and all your volunteers are kind of overlapping, it does make it complicated. But for example, in 2023, we did this nice like horseshoe rainbow shape that was only 4 meters in thickness all the way around. And so all of our volunteers were spread out really nicely. And so I think that this is an opportunity to think about what your shape will be, or like what Sharon did of the long rectangle in some areas, then your volunteers are spaced out and you can have more. Yeah.
Great suggestion. A quick question. Somebody would like to know what the bioinoculant was again. So that's directed to you, Kristen.
I think I threw it in the chat again, but I can throw it again in the chat.
Amazing. Thank you. We have a question, maybe this one's for you, Tahia, about whether you expect to see an increase in the spread of tree diseases with plantings that are so close together.
I think you have to bear in mind there that the diversity of the forest. So if it would be a monoculture, yes, but it's not the case. And I think that also speaks to the resilience of the forest, the fact that you have really multiple layers of multiple species. So the spread will be contained that way or managed in a different way by that redundancy and that resiliency.
Thank you so much. And I think we have time for just one more question before we sign off. This question is, does Green Communities Canada or any of the organizations present have experience planting mini forests in schoolyards as part of the Green Schoolyards movement? Tianna, I'll pass it to you to maybe start us off.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. So this past year, there was multiple of projects that we supported that were planted in schoolyards. So Green Up planted one in Peterborough at a local school, as well as the Halton District School Board planted one in Milton, Ontario at a local school. So yeah, those projects have been really great. The students are involved, and that's a lot of where our youth volunteers come from. So definitely opportunities within school grounds to reclaim some of that asphalt.
Wonderful. We are at 2:59. So out of respect for everybody's time, we're going to end here. If there were other questions that pertain to resources, we'll do our best to share those back out. We had a huge number of attendees today at our first webinar. So thank you so much to everybody that came out. Thank you so much to our presenters. It was really wonderful to hear about your successes, the mini forest model, the innovative research you're doing, and how much the community has been involved in this project. It's wonderful, and we're really heartened to see the momentum around the mini forest movement here in Canada. So thank you again for being here today and for all the work you're doing in your communities. It's pretty inspiring.